Take the North podcast. I'm David Haugh on the Mully and Haugh Show on 670 The Score. Dan Wiederer is from the Chicago Tribune. He is at Halas Hall, and we are days away from the Bears and the Broncos at Soldier Field. Sunday, October 1st, the start of a new month. Is it a start of a new chapter for the Bears? They have not won since last October 24th. Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I literally just got done filing a long feature for ChicagoTribune.com about how chaotic September was, and October has to be better, right? I mean, I think that's what we're looking at here. We've got 5 games that the Bears will play between now and Halloween. They play against opponents that have a combined record of 4-11 through the first 3 weeks of the season, and so you would hope that there would be a window of opportunity here to at least start to make strides in a direction that feel a little bit better.
Busy week at Halas Hall. A lot of things, a lot of observations, a lot of things to discuss. Let's get right to it with our opening drive.
It's time for the opening drive.
So, Dan, I think that overall, let's reset. We heard from Justin Fields. He was not in a great mood. We heard from Matt Eberflus. He thinks they're close. And then we hear from Luke Getsy. And these are just the highlights. There was a lot of other things in between. But I found myself... And this doesn't happen often with Luke Getsy, and I'm curious if we'll just start here to get your perspective. I always think he's the guy that's going to tell us the truth and be the most grounded. And when he talks about being close to being special with this Bears offense that hasn't scored more than 20 points since week 11 last year, I wonder if he's been infected with the Bear virus as well. And I wonder if he's really being as forthright as he's typically been in the past. And I just wonder... or if that's reading too much into his words and how he said them, or what you thought as somebody who's up there all the time, because I don't know if I'm buying what the Bears are selling about their offense being this close.
Yeah, in this instance, I'm probably selling that if you're asking me to buy or sell. I do think that this is a group here that is grasping. I think they're grasping that there's an urgency and a desperation that's involved right now, that creates some feelings to try to find the thing that gives you some sense of encouragement. And look, like we've lived through this before with previous regimes and previous bad teams where the sentiment of, oh, we're close, oh, if we just took care of these 6 or 7 or 8 plays, imagine how different reality would have been, when that's just a fictitious world that doesn't exist. The Bears obviously have to find a way to hit stride offensively. I think the one thing I consistently take away from Luke is how process-oriented he is, how much he tries to keep Justin in that space to understand that progress isn't always going to be linear, as we found out very, very directly over the first 3 games of this season, and that you still have to have a faith in the growth plan and the growth process in a way that allows you to trust in things that are going on around you. I think that's part of trying to instill trust that they have his best interest and his development in the right frame of mind as they go forward. But I don't think anything we've seen through the first 3 weeks of the season in any phase of this football team tells you that they're close, or that the word special should be attached to any of it.
We're a week removed from what you described as one of the more chaotic weeks you've been around in a decade covering the team. That was last week. This week, I wonder how they bounce back mentally with the damaged psyche and all the losing and the cumulative effect on the team and the players and the coaches and everybody. Because, Brad Biggs, as we talked to, Dan, like on the Mully and Haugh Show every morning, it's Biggs time. And he described the other day going into the open locker room and not having a lot of enthusiasm, not having a lot of activity or energy. I wondered if you sensed the same thing, and how you overall would describe how the Bears are responding to 0-3 and the way that they lost the third game especially.
I'm going to take this in 2 directions, and I'm going to start with kind of what you mentioned there. And look, like you remember very, very clearly 2 weeks ago, we were talking about the vibes that were out here in week 2 leading up to that game against the Buccaneers. And I just felt a discouragement that lingered after the loss of the Packers, that kind of took a while for this team to get through, and it just seeped too deep into week 2, and they couldn't get past it. And then obviously a week ago, week 3, we know was, as you mentioned, chaotic. And there was an uneasiness in the building the entire week. So we went from discouragement to uneasiness. I sense things are calmer inside the building this week, but I don't know what kind of calm that is. Obviously it's a little bit after the storm passes. There's just okay, let's take our deep breath and survey the wreckage and figure out where the first cleanup needs to be done. And I feel like that's kind of where they are right now. They understand they've got an opponent coming to Soldier Field here that is also winless, that should present an opportunity for them to maybe do some of the things that they want to do more readily than they were able to do against the defenses that they faced in the first 3 weeks of the season. And so there's that level of calm to them. Like, okay, now maybe we can play a possession or two, a quarter or two on our terms and see where that leads us. Now, the other part of this is that I was going to tell you, because I think this is kind of notable on the grand scheme, is that the media room this week, David, there was a heaviness in the media room this week, with people looking down at the calendars on the bottom corner of their laptop and going, how is it still September? How are we in this place in week 4 and thinking about having 14 more weeks in this building, of having to go in these locker rooms of a team that is just so far from relevance, so far from meaningful competitiveness, and having to do this dance for another 3.5 months. And it was significant across the room. And I really felt that starting in the press box in Arrowhead on Sunday, and it creeped into this week. And then I had a really kind of a fun, but a really honest conversation with Eddie Jackson at his locker earlier in the week. And I said, Eddie, I know there's a perception in certain pockets that, the media thrives on this, that this is the time where, oh yeah, great, kick them while they're down. This is what we live for. I said, it couldn't be further from the truth. And I can tell you from that room in there that everyone is just tired of this cycle. And he was laughing and he said, yeah, I remember 2018. And we started talking about that. I said, remember 2018 when everybody really liked each other, when all the questions we asked were about the fun everyone was having. And there was a 10-game stretch where the Bears lost one time, and that one loss was in overtime when they came back with a backup quarterback playing. And it was like everything for close to 3 months there was just joyous, and it was adrenalizing, and everyone loved it. It's the complete opposite right now. I think everyone is hoping we get some sort of script flip. I think we understand, David, that this season is not going where 2018 went, but let's get something to refresh this in a positive way here soon.
I think that everybody understands that. And the reason I think, and I've said this before, all those memories from 2018 stand out so much is because they're so few and far between. It doesn't happen. You can't
5
say,
years ago.
Which was that, the 2019 or 2020 when the Bears won a playoff game? They just haven't had these kind of seasons. And that's why you look at the historic losing and the futility, and it's so frustrating. And I wonder how much that permeates not necessarily the building, but the organization, when you see guys like Justin Fields on Wednesday. And I don't want to overreact to a podium appearance, but it's also, you're the quarterback of the Chicago Bears, so you can't ignore it. And I think that reality and perception in markets like Chicago, NFL cities like Chicago, they have this codependent relationship. And sometimes, perception shapes reality, and sometimes it doesn't. But when you are Justin Fields, and a week after you spend 11 minutes, talking about how you need to play freer and less robotic, and you get into the coaching issue and the controversy, and you call guys back, and what we saw and heard from Justin Fields on Wednesday, I think, was a reminder just how young he is, and also how little direction and advice that I think he gets. This is the part where it is maybe something that's overstated a little bit by the media, maybe that cover the team, or maybe people in talk radio or whatever. But I'm consistently amazed, and I don't get consistently amazed, but I'm consistently surprised how little teams prepare these players to shape the perception in ways that could be productive for everybody.
I think it's an interesting conversation, to be honest with you, because I thought it was a predictable act of defiance from Justin a week after he felt like he had gotten burned by the comments he made up here. I was pretty much expecting him to be in that kind of state of mind. And I give him that. Like, you've got your one opportunity to lash back at the media in that way. Go ahead and take it. I'll share this in a minute, but I think, to your point, you have to understand that as you stare out at a room of what I'm looking at right now with 25 chairs filled, that your press conference is also being live broadcast on the team's official streams, right, on the website, on X, and on all these other platforms, and you're trying to project a sense of positivity, of confidence, of leadership to more than just the people who are in this room, and is it a huge thing? Maybe not. Is it something? For sure? And I think there is a maturity element of that needs to be developed. Andrew Janocko, the quarterback's coach, was asked this very specific question by Mark Potash on Thursday evening on whether he cares about the demeanor that Justin brings in his interaction to the media. And he said, look, like, we're trying to make him, our number one goal is to make him a good football player. But with that, we're trying to make him a more well-rounded person as well. And some of that is growing through these experiences and understanding how to handle them and doing so with a grace and a maturity that is befitting of a captain of the team, And so I will tell you that I did walk out of the session on Wednesday and I just thought, man, that's just, it's a missed opportunity to take a step of growth in that moment. He can take it going forward. Now, I have been trying to get up with Justin since last week. I did finally, and I was debating whether to share this on the show, but I did finally catch up with him in the locker room on Wednesday. And I just directly addressed my part in whatever last week was and said, look, like, I hold you to a very high standard here. And I'm critical of a lot of things you do. I have to hold the same accountability to myself. And I have to take ownership of the just the clumsiness of the knee-jerk tweet that I put out after his media session last week and not intending or realizing sort of the mushrooming whatever that it caused. And so, we talked about it for 90 seconds to 2 minutes. And I don't think there was any significant animosity. He extended his hand to me and shook it at the end and said, I appreciate you coming to me about that. And so, you hope that things like that can be put aside quickly. You hope that this demeanor that Justin had Wednesday at his press conference is not one that then persists into week 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Because if he's going to come up here every Wednesday and present himself in that manner, you're not going to get a lot of people rallying, right? Like, it's just going to feel like, oh man, this is a defeated team with a leader who's sullen, and this team can't afford that at this point. And then to your point, I think behind the scenes, there has to be some of that messaging on, like, this is how you handle this. And this is how you need to do this for us as an organization, because, like it or not, at 24 years old, you're the face of this thing and you've got to take us in the direction that you want us to go.
Interesting. So I'm not surprised you approached him. I'm glad you did. I don't think that you deserved a lot of the criticism you got for the tweet, and we don't have to revisit that. I just think that it
was over the top for sure.
That got blown out of proportion as well. So, and I do think those kinds of conversations you have with players that you cover and situations that might be misunderstandings, they're productive and they're healthy for the long term. The other thing, and the last thing I have on this, is that the reason why it becomes an issue in forums like this one, or in shorter, more condensed versions on sports talk radio or in digital platforms or newspapers, is because we buy into the idea that we're told all the time, well, the quarterback in any NFL organization is the guy, when he walks into the building, everybody changes their mood and it changes the temperature in the room. And he's got that kind of power and that kind of reach, and it can have that kind of impact. And you look at the Joe Burrows and the Patrick Mahomes and the Josh Allens and the examples that are guys who that does happen in those organizations. And there are a lot of people in town that believe that Justin Fields could be that guy, and maybe still believe he can be that guy. When you are that guy, or potentially that guy, everything matters. Everything matters, and not anything can be dismissed. That's a ton of pressure, but that's why the size of the contracts are what they are. There's a lot at stake here, not just in terms of financial, but the Bears are a public trust. I interviewed Mayor Brandon Johnson on TV Wednesday night, and he talked about the same thing. We say it all the time. When the Bears mean as much as they do to city of Chicago, and when an NFL team means as much as it can to a city anywhere, then the quarterback takes on a lot, and you can't just dismiss your obligation and responsibility to be an ambassador and a representative and a professional 24/7, 365.
Yeah, it's a heavy demand for sure. And DJ Moore spoke to us on Thursday afternoon in the locker room, and he said he saw Justin's news conference, and he said, I told him he needs to smile more, and he was joking about it, but it was a good piece of advice. And Andrew Janocko talked about that as well. It's just like the power of a smile and just still being able to convey charisma amid chaos. And that's something that Justin will have to go on. I think there's a perception that, like I think you've said it before that it's evaluation, not an insult, right? Some of the things that we do as analysts,
Right.
and like I like Justin as an individual. I think he's been a really good dude to be around for 2.5 years. I think he handles himself for the most part very well in what you just described as a very demanding responsibility, and so. Look, he's 24 years old, and there's a lot of things that are on his plate that were never on your plate or my plate at age 24. I know I wouldn't have been able to handle it, and so hopefully this is just another piece, in his own words, of adversity that he's able to grow from and mature from, and use in a positive way going forward.
All right, let's look at some of the other aspects of this game between the Bears and the Broncos in our game plan. And the other big story, I think, at Hallis this week was Matt Eberflus removing doubt and accepting all of the responsibility for calling defensive signals and not going either outside the organization. The Rod Marinelli rumor was out there for whatever reason. And also, and other guys probably were considered, but not going and bringing somebody into the organization. And that, which I think is a mistake, not promoting somebody on a staff that has capable, qualified, experienced people to do that part of the job to allow Matt Eberflus to become a better head coach. I don't want to overstate the significance, and sometimes I fear, in the morning show and these little snippets, we tend to maybe do that, or I tend to maybe do that. But I do think it's an important distinction, and I'm not sure Matt Eberflus is a better head coach because he's calling defensive signals.
No, and particularly at a time where your oversight as the head coach is as meaningful as ever, right? Like you have the responsibility of steadying everything that's been going on here for the first 3 weeks, and it just requires more work at this stage because they're not on stable ground. Nothing is steady around here, and so now you add in the mix of having to be the defensive play caller and the guy who's kind of overseeing all of that, and it does become more challenging. We'll see how Matt does with it. He did say earlier in the week that he had planned to continue down this path for the remainder of the season. It sounded like he did leave some wiggle room if it wasn't going well, that there would be an opportunity to have additional discussions. But this seems to be the path they're on. And now you've got to go figure out a way to make it work, with the staff you have around you, and you have to go try to win a football game again against the Denver team that, is reeling a little bit, but certainly still has some established difference makers in this league, right?
Do you think it impairs his ability to be the CEO? And do you think that it's a fair example when you talk about how he got caught sort of in the, not caught, but like he misdescribed or described incorrectly the Tyreek Stevenson injury and recovery, and maybe the decisions to put Justin Fields back or make a decision, or the judgment of concussions on Sunday in Kansas City could have been affected by doing too much. Do you think that's a fair criticism?
Well, I think naturally you're going to be spread thin more than you would be otherwise. And when you get spread thin, certain things suddenly slip by that might not otherwise slip by. I think you mentioned the CEO part of this. I think the other thing we got to keep an eye on is the game management part of this. Like you're going to have to be overseeing a defense. Oh, by the way, your offense just got the ball back. You got 2 timeouts. There's 1:36 left in the first half. You've got to manage this entire game situation here, and so just kind of wearing those different hats and juggling those different, I'd say knives, but maybe wanted to go apples. I don't know. I don't know what you want to juggle around here these days. It's just there's another thing to juggle, and it's not easy. And so you got to figure out a way to handle that, and you got to figure out a way to bring out what your best assets are as a coach while doing that. And then, like I say, there's just another set of duties that you're in charge of.
The other big story is the attrition in the secondary, the injury report, which is Bears daily monitoring because of the caliber of the player that are on it. Jalen Johnson, Blackwell, you have Tyreek Stevenson, who was a full participant in practice on Wednesday, and it looks like he's going to be okay. But how would you describe the state of health in the secondary and how good and ready that defense is for the challenge of the Broncos?
Yeah, look, I mean, like Kyler Gordon, IR, Eddie Jackson still out, Jalen Johnson working through some things, Josh Blackwell, like so you're thin, and you and I had talked in training camp about the depth in the safety position being challenged. Well, now the corner depth is being challenged, and you've got to figure it out, and you've got to figure it out on the fly. Eddie Jackson feels optimistic about the direction that his recovery is going. I think he determinedly wants to get into Sunday's game in some way, shape, or form. He was trying to lobby to be on a snap count because I think he feels like he can make a difference. I don't think they're going to do it. I don't think he's going to play on Sunday. And you've got a quick turnaround to next Thursday, right? Like, I mean, you're playing these 2 games here in a span of 5 days. And so you've got to manage that as well as a coach, So look, it's not pretty because Sean Payton and Russell Wilson may not be at their best right now, but they're still Sean Payton and Russell Wilson. And I'll get into more of that during my prediction. But you cannot expose holes on your own defense that allow them to take advantage of things that put you in a dangerous situation. And so, it's not great to be looking at that injury report and seeing how depleted the secondary is.
Related to the secondary, the Bears poached Joanne Williams off the Vikings practice squad, a big cornerback, big body guy. The Patriots made him the 5th, I think it was the 45th overall pick of the 2019 NFL draft. Second rounder, was injured last year, went to the Vikings. I don't know if he's going to be one of these guys, Dan, that is up and running because he has to be. What do they have in a Joanne Williams, or do you know?
Yeah, not sure. Yeah, our guy Bigsy's been excited about the practice squad poaching of Joanne Williams, and we'll see what kind of role might be there for him in his first days on the team here. Obviously, you would think maybe some special teams contributions if he's active, and then you just have to be ready. You have to be ready to play in a pinch. We mentioned Jalen Jones last week as a guy who came in, Quindell Johnson who came in on the back end of the defense. There's a lot of different guys being forced into heavier action here, and you got to keep producing because this league doesn't just stop and wait around for all your guys to get healthy.
Good segue to the offensive line. Is Nate Davis going to be productive this week? Do you think that he will be back? He's not been on the injury list. Can we assume that he will be active? Can we assume if he is, he'll be starting?
I don't assume anything with Nate Davis at this point. We'll see how it evolves. If I was leaning one direction, I'd say yes, he plays. He starts at right guard, and they figure out where to go from there. Hopefully, he'll be able to get himself back in the right space to be able to play and contribute for this Bears offensive line, because you want that thing closer to full strength than it's been. You want Justin having that comfort there. Listen, like Chris Morgan, the offensive line coach, was almost glowing in his reviews of how Ja'Tyre Carter has filled in here, not only for the first 3 games of the season, but during camp when guys were out. And so I think that Chris feels like they've got a little bit of a diamond in the rough that they're still polishing here in Ja'Tyre, and that's not to be lost here amid some of the attrition on the offensive line. I think you've heard from Olin Kreutz before talking about some of the works he's done with Ja'Tyre Carter behind the scenes and the promise that's there. And so maybe you stumble into something really good when you have a setback like this and you identify a guy that can be part of your starting group going forward if you can continue to push his development in the right direction.
All right, let's move on to our numbers game and also our predictions. All right, let's start with the numbers, Dan. Nice package in the Chicago Tribune. ChicagoTribune.com is there every Thursday, beginning on Thursday, for people to check out. Liked a lot of them. What were your favorites?
Yeah, I'll go with 4 of them tonight. We'll start with the most obvious, which is 726. That's the number of yards that the Denver Broncos allowed to the Miami Dolphins in the Week 3 loss. The Dolphins averaged 10.2 yards per play and had 4 different players record a gain of 50-plus yards. Tyreek Hill had a 54-yard touchdown reception. Devon A-Chain, am I pronouncing that right? That one's changed a couple times. He had a 67-yard touchdown run. Robbie Chosen, 68-yard touchdown pass. Chris Brooks, 52-yard touchdown run. It seemed like every time you put on a series that the Dolphins were running, they were in the end zone. It was big plays. It was crazy. Tua Tagovailoa, by the way, 4 touchdown passes, 3 incompletions against this Broncos defense. So that should be something that Justin Fields and Luke Getsy look at and go, okay, LFG.
23 of 26 Tua was. A year ago this week was when he went down with that scary concussion. He has rebounded nicely. I remember the conversation being, will he ever play again? He's not only playing again, he's playing like one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Here's the thing before we move on to your next one. That Denver defense, I know it's terrible because of the numbers. They're historically bad, but going into this season, even last year, that was a defense that a lot of people around the league thought had some talent. And with Vic, they were guys that you didn't think were capable of just, giving up what they've given up.
Well, and they're beat up a little bit right now. Justin Simmons, we'll see what his status is for Sunday. He's one of their better players on the back end of that defense. Josie Jewell dealing with some soft tissue stuff as well, and no telling where he's at. But look, 70 and 726 are numbers that you just do not see outside of the Big 12.
What's the next one?
All right, let's go right into the Big 12. We've got a rookie out of Oklahoma. The number is 7. It's Marvin Mims. He's touched the ball 15 times through the first 3 games of his NFL career, and 7 of those touches have gone for 30 yards or more. We've got receptions of 30, 38, 53, and a 60-yard touchdown reception. We've got a punt return of 45 yards. We've got a kickoff return of 30 yards and another kickoff return of 99 yards and a touchdown. So big play Marvin Mims is a guy the Bears better have on their radar for Sunday afternoon.
That's a remarkable big play capability. That is something that, when you talk about bad defenses, yeah, you're not restricted to just talking about the Broncos.
No doubt at all. All right, my next one, David, 60. It's the third down conversion rate of Bears opponents through 3 games this season. The Bears were dead last in the NFL a year ago with their third down defense. That was at 49%. They are significantly worse through the first 3 games of this season. The Chiefs were 10 for 14 the other day. We know what the pain was in watching them extend drives and then put the ball in the end zone. My God, like a 60% third down conversion rate is not going to get it done. That's got to get turned around in a hurry.
The Bronco defense might have had worse third down numbers if the Dolphins would have actually had to, snap on third down. They never really got there.
Yeah, that's how it goes. Last number. This one's fun, and you'll like this one because you remember a lot of these. 2.5. It's the average margin of victory in the past 4 games of the Bears-Broncos series. Both teams have each won 2 games out of the last 4. The time machine will take us first back to 2007. I was actually in the stands that day.
Oh, really?
Not in the press box.
Was that the Hester game?
Devin Hester, 2 return touchdowns in that game. Don't forget a final minute touchdown pass from Rex Grossman to Bernard Berrien to force overtime. And the Chicago Bears pulled out a 37-34 victory over
Jay Cutler and the Broncos.
And Brandon Marshall and the Broncos.
That's right. I remember that. That was a November game. And I remember the Hester touchdown. I remember the comeback. That was one of those great days at Soldier Field.
Misty and cold out there,
yes.
But tons of explosive plays in that game. And obviously, anytime Hester does his thing, it's wonderful. 4 years later, we fast forward. We go to Denver. The Bears are beating average Broncos team 10-0 deep into the fourth quarter. And then guess what happened? Tebow mania took over.
Tebow.
Marion Barber lost track of the game. Somehow the game went into overtime, and the Bears lost 13-10. I would love to pull up your column from that afternoon and see what some of the stuff was in that.
Marion Barber, that was a bad loss. I remember about that trip and that game. You're going to laugh at me, but all I remember most is that the Marion Barber play. I remember Tebow coming back and being – that was right when he was starting to capture people's imagination in the NFL. Like, how are they doing this with this offense? And then I remember buying my son, who was, I think, 10 at the time, coming home with the Tim Tebow jersey. And yes, I did that to my kid. And he was like, this was before he discovered hockey. Dad, what's that? Who's he? And then, but yeah, I was part of Tebow. There he is. I was part of Tebow Mania. I remember that game well.
All right. So then 4 years after that, first year under John Fox, the Bears were a feisty team playing John Fox's old team, the team in Denver that was headed to the Super Bowl, but they were out without Peyton Manning that day at Soldier Field. And the Bears had a chance to tie the game in the final minute, scored a touchdown, went for 2, and the conversion failed. Price is right horn. Wah, wah, wah. Remember that one?
Brock Osweiler, was he the quarterback for the
Correct.
Broncos that day?
Yep.
Yes, I do remember the Brock Osweiler start, and I do remember the disappointment.
The most recent one, 2019, 16-14 Bears. Walk-off, Eddie Pinero, Eddie Money, Pinero De Niro field goal after Mitch Trubisky hit Allen Robinson with 1 second left to set up a deep kick, and the Bears escaped after losing that opener of the 100th season to the Packers. They rebounded in week 2 against Vic Fangio and the Broncos in Denver, and it was Eddie Pinero, the kicker that they had spent the entire offseason trying to find, saving the day.
The Augusta silence, he mastered that with the tryouts. I remember him at Hallis Hall. I do wonder this. So, expert trivia on the spot, Dan. Where is Eddie Pinero and where is Allen Robinson right now?
Allen Robinson, I just saw him make a catch for the Steelers last week.
Yeah, he's in Pittsburgh, right?
And I believe Eddie Pinero is still in Carolina kicking for Chris Tabor.
Oh, that's true. All the ex-Bear special teamers go to wherever Chris Tabor is working this season, and they find work.
There you go. And Eddie Pinero's still
That's a
around.
good. That's a good list. I like those. That's a very nice, fun trip down memory lane. All right,
Yeah.
those are the numbers. Now let's do our predictions. Let's bring in Adam Sudzinski. Studs have been thinking about this all week. You have the 0-3 Bears, the 0-3 Broncos. Who is going to be winless on Sunday night?
If I could, real quick before I do my prediction, because you sparked some memories with those old Broncos games. I vividly remember the Devin Hester game. That was with the announcers are saying, "Why are you kicking to him? Like, what do you like? Stop kicking to him!" Like, and they're like, as Devin Hester's running back the kick, they're like, "Why would you do this?"
Was it the punter? Was the punter?
Sauerbrunn. Yeah. I think he kicked off and punted at that time.
He also, I think he also had a punt block that day too. It was like one of the worst days you've ever seen a kicker have. And then the Tim Tebow game.
Oh boy!
I watched that game alone. I watched the end of that game alone at my house in college, and I remember being so thankful I was alone because it's maybe the most distraught I've ever been after a loss. Like I was after a Bears game, I was like so livid because I was like, they can't blow this game to this guy. Like he's terrible. Don't do this to me. And so it was just a bad.
So were you a victim of Tebow mania, or were you a believer or not?
I hated him in the NFL. I liked him a lot in college.
How do you like him in college and hate him in the NFL? I mean, he was pretty polarizing.
I don't know.
Really?
Well, it's because he was so bad, but he kept winning games somehow, and this made no sense to me. And so, yeah, I did like him a lot at Florida though, for whatever reason.
So, he won a playoff game.
Yeah, he did. It was on that against the Steelers, right? He made an incredible throw in overtime, like
to Demaryius Thomas.
Yeah. So, but anyway, I just had to share those because that sparks some memories. So anyway, I did think a lot more about this one than I thought I was going to when the season started about this game. And so I did end up picking the Bears, but it comes with this caveat, and you guys hold me to this. If the Bears don't put up 25 points, and this is a freaking low bar to clear, 25 points against a team that gave up 35 to the Commanders and 70 to the Dolphins. Like, the Dolphins are going to score 30 plus against a lot of teams this year, and the 70s kind of a freak thing, I know, but they gave up 105 points in 2 games. You got to get 25 plus at the very least. Moving in the right direction. So I got the Bears winning 26-25, barely clearing my own low bar. But if they can't do that, I'm not picking until they win a game this season. Hold me to that, please. Because I'll pick them to lose every game until they start winning. If they lose like 30-26, I can and we see Justin Fields going in the right direction and all that stuff, then I'll find a way to cope. But if they can't get 25 on this defense, then I mean that's terrible. Just terrible. So there you go.
So that's a lot of faith. That's a lot of faith to place in the Bears, but I admire your loyalty.
You got it. The Commanders with Sam Howell got 35 points on this defense. You got to find a way to get 25. And
Dan?
So
I have less faith. Poor Studs in crisis mode. He's not going to like this prediction. I've got Broncos 27, Bears 19, including a Cairo Santos missed extra point.
What are you picking Santos for? He's the only guy doing his job.
I know. It just feels like this is where we're headed. I didn't need much time to think about this. I just for me right now, I don't know what you trust about this Bears team. There's just literally nothing to trust in. And when you sit there and you go, okay, can we trust the pass rush? Can we trust the run defense? Can we trust the passing attack? Can we trust especially what are we going to lean on to get us out of the skid? I can't trust anything. And then as I mentioned earlier, the Broncos is as bad as they were last week, still have Sean Payton and Russell Wilson. These are two guys that have a savvy about them and understand how to find your holes. The Broncos are obviously going to have to be way better on defense, and I think Vance Joseph, the DC, has been put on notice. You give up 35 to this struggling Bears offense, and you're probably out of a job on Monday. Broncos 27, Bears 19.
So, by the way, before we get too farther, Caleb Haney was the quarterback on the day against Tim Tebow. While we're going,
we can't get out of the 2011 time machine.
All right, so this is what I think about the Bears and the Broncos. I think that the Bears have not earned back the benefit of the doubt if they ever had it. I don't think that I'm going to pick them to win again until they win again. And I think they are closer to being the worst team and in the NFL than they are a playoff team. I think they're actually closer to being the worst team than they are being a winning team. They're just closer to being the worst team, period, than I would be comfortable with 4 weeks into the season. So when you look at the units, the two worst units are the Bears offense and the Bronco defense. Both are broken, historically bad in both cases. But I think this doesn't probably make any sense. The Bears offense, I think they have a harder time bouncing back than the Bronco defense. And I think so that may be a wash. Maybe they cancel each other out. But the Bear offense or the Bear defense and the Bronco offense is better. The Bear defense isn't good enough to stop it. So if the other matchup is a wash and the Bronco offense scores points, that's going to be the difference. Broncos 31, Bears 27.
Whew. You got them scoring 25 points, though. See,
I don't understand that. I heard people say, like, oh, if the Bears lose by 10, but they score 27 points, I won't be that unhappy. Really?
I think that's just from a fan perspective here. That's a coping mechanism, and that's like, show me that you're moving in the right direction, and I'll stick with whatever the hell this is a little bit longer. I think that's what that is.
Yeah, that could be the case. I hope that Dan and I are wrong, because listen, this is a franchise, this is a city, this is a radio station that needs to change the subject.
No kidding.
It's like,
no kidding.
There's got to be something that is different here at some point in time, because this is painfully redundant, and I have said that before. So I'm being painfully redundant at pointing out that it's painfully redundant.
Here's the other worry, that if the Bears do win and get that full feeling of relief and satisfaction of finally breaking the skid, they've got to turn around, 3 days later and get on a plane to go to Washington to play the Commanders, and they won't even have time to fully enjoy it. And then if they lose that game to the Commanders, we're right back into to week 6 with, like, oh God, it's, like they didn't even have a chance to even soak that one in.
Well, there's a very real possibility that lingers there. Mully and I talked about it this morning, that this could be a 2-for-1 type of deal either way. If you win, you might feel like, all right, short week, you got some momentum back, you ride that to Washington and you upset the Commanders. Maybe that's optimistic. But if you lose, short week, tough turnaround. Those injuries that might be, oh yeah, I'm going to come back and play your 0-4. Why would you rush back to be in a hurry to be 0-5? All of a sudden, you lose this game, you might get a 2-for-1 deal.
Ugh.
All right, let's get into our 2-minute drill.
The 2-minute drill. The 2-minute drill.
Really wanted your opinion on this, Dan, really quickly. But this week, not that we in the media pay a little closer attention to this stuff than maybe others. Peter King from Football Morning in America, NBCSports.com, respected veteran, longtime NFL guy. He wrote that Justin Fields may have a few more weeks left. Big Z on the Mully and Haugh show on Tuesday morning surprised the heck out of me, and writing in the ChicagoTribune.com, the true or false that Justin Fields needs a break. Big Z's like, true. And then he pointed out that, this isn't guaranteed that he's going to be your starter moving forward if things don't change. Are you in that camp? What did you think of those opinions that aren't necessarily, as we know, knee-jerk? They talk to people. You talk to people. Is this something that is the next level of conversation as it pertains to Justin Fields?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the natural next step if things continue to go down the same path that they're going down. We've talked previously about, obviously, you're not going to make a switch on a short week next week, but if you have major worry and major anxiety about the direction things are headed, and you get your first of too many buys in the season after the game in Washington, maybe it makes you have a longer conversation about where things head. Look, like, this isn't unprecedented in terms of where the timeline is for quarterbacks when people inside the building start to get a little antsy about your development. You remember the game in LA when Mitch Trubisky left with a very timely injury, in that game that they were losing to the Rams in 2019. That, I think, was either late October or early November of that season. And so, we're not far off from the point where it's like, hey, like, we need to see something and we got to go now. Otherwise we got to take a look at something else. Now, look, like, Mitch came back a couple different times after that initial injury / kind of benching and was back in as a starter in various points. But, like, there is nothing that says it's off limits to have that discussion.
So we miss a lot of the conversations that you're able to have with coaches, with players. We can't get to everything in every pod. and certainly in every story or every interview. Anything stand out that we didn't really address or got a little bit overlooked this week?
Yeah, a couple quick things that I wanted to run through. Number one, I think that the No Excuses Tour is being phased out by the More Excuses Tour. I am startled at how there just continues to be another pile of excuses every single week. A week ago, it was, man, the coaching staff really has to dial back and make things a little bit easier for Justin to play free. And then they put in a more simplified game plan against the Chiefs, and then the Chiefs defended it, and it was like, well, that was too easy to defend. Why did they do that? It's like, well, because you just said that they needed to do that to free up the quarterback to play more freely, and it had to give him more defined reads and more opportunity to scramble and run. And so the excuses are adding up way too much. The other one I wanted to throw at you is someone in the league asked me to as a take a look at the state of the Bears situation. Run through this in your brain really quick and rattle off the players that you 100% expect to be on this roster in 2025. Fast forward 22 months and tell me who you could rattle off on that list, and then I'll tell you the list that I came up with.
Darnell Wright, DJ Moore, Roschon Johnson, I would say Javon Dexter, Pickens, Tremaine Edmonds, Kyler Gordon, Jaquan Brisker.
All right, pretty good. I think you came up with 8 there. I had Cole Kmet and Tyreek Stevenson on there. I didn't have Roschon Johnson, but you might be onto something with that one. And Dexter and Pickens. I mean, come on, 2 years from now, if there's a whole regime change in here and those guys haven't produced, there's that.
Guys, you're right.
Putting those in as a 1,000%ers is like going back to the Eagle Ferguson Will Sutton days. Let's see some plays before we.
God, that's a great recall.
Before we push them onto a new regime, but that just gives you a sign of just kind of how bleak it is here and how much work this roster needs and how much work hasn't really gotten fully accomplished here. So that one's a little disheartening. The last thing I had for you is I was curious, since you did talk to the mayor of Chicago, what your takeaway from him is on the Bears stadium issue, because that's something that's gotten pushed to the background question. With all the chaos that's been going on around the team.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because we did have him speak on the record. I think that was the first time he was interviewed about the stadium project. I would think bullet point wise, this is what I got from it. And it was a great access to him. And I really appreciated him coming to NBC Sports Chicago. Layla Rahimi and I interviewed Brandon Johnson, the mayor of Chicago, on Football Night in Chicago. You can find it on their YouTube page. Number one, he believes that public financing and professional sports teams, I think he didn't say it in these plain terms, but he was very careful that I don't think public subsidies are something that he believes in or should have pro sports teams should have access to. I think that's a really important line to draw for any politician, especially one who's the mayor of a city with as many issues and problems as Chicago faces. That's not a political statement. That's just reality. So I think that I got that sense from him, even though he might not put it in those terms. The other thing is that he does believe that there's a real opportunity and a chance that the Bears will stay in Chicago, because he believes, and it may be just optimistic politician talking, but he believes that his relationship with Kevin Warren gives them a shot to make this work or make an appeal that makes sense to the Bears, and then maybe figure out the rest later. I don't know. It seems overly ambitious and maybe not realistic, but you're telling me, if you're asking my impressions of him, what he thinks, I think he believes that. And then the last one was, I asked him, because he was a young Bears fan growing up in Elgin when they won the Super Bowl, and he was a Mike Singletary guy, and he bought into the the Super Bowl shuffle and the bear weather myth, all the stuff. So I asked him directly, that as a believer, as a guy who grew up with that around him, where are you on dome stadiums? Because the next stadium, whether it's in Chicago or Arlington Heights, I believe should be an enclosed structure.
It has to, yeah.
If you're going to do that in Chicago, it's going to be more expensive, and I want to know what that looks like. But he did sound like somebody, again, speaking very carefully, like politicians tend to do. He referenced climate change. He referenced the elements. He referenced controlling things and attracting things. So he sounded like a pro-dome guy to me. So if they are able to keep the Bears in Chicago, and they're able to either renovate Soldier Field or build on a site that was determined, and he wouldn't tell me where, then I think that it would be an enclosed structure in the city, which, let's face it, I think it's still going to be Arlington Heights. I'm not going to change my opinion there. But if it were in Chicago and it were an enclosed structure, that would be terrific for the city, because I don't think you can beat the location. You certainly can't beat the skyline. And I think Brandon Johnson did what he needed to do in that appearance. He kept the momentum, or he kept he didn't close any doors, and that's the one thing you can't do as a politician. So he kept all possibilities open.
That's a good update from that side of things. Thank you for providing it.
That's a little bit more than 2 minutes, so I think I ran over the play clock. Oh,
Doesn't matter.
All right.
No
So
punishments.
Sunday at Soldier Field, we're going to be back with our post-game pod. Broncos and the Bears. Russell Wilson returns to the spot where he had a very good day as a rookie in 2012, and Brian Urlacher's last game, I believe, as a Chicago Bear. We'll reminisce a little bit about that on Sunday, but we'll be back with the post-game pod. We want to thank you for listening to the Take the North podcast on your free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. You also can watch us on the 670 Scores YouTube page. For Adam Tudzinski, who still believes in the Bears, Dan Wiederer, who is at Haugh. I'm David Haugh. Thanks for listening to the Take the North podcast.
Great talk. See you out there.